The thing that really makes you look as though you're not paying attention is when your prose rhymes. Rhymes are not allowed. I actually wrote in a book called, it was a big monstrous old thing, where Dick our cadence. Hellfire Club. Thank you. My memory is over there. In the last third of a big book called Hellfire Club, after many, many crazy things had happened, and I was very pleased with the book, there was the locale reverted to an old writers' colony in Massachusetts that's based on Edith Wharton's House the Mount. And it had a manager, it was all run and staffed by women, and of course it had a cook. Now I found, on the 90th time I read that page, I saw the sentence, the cook took a look at the book. That's a textbook page. That's a triple bloody right. The cook took a look at the book. I almost fainted. Where was Peter? You know? Now, this is a little less elemental, but it's nonetheless, it's even more important, probably. It has to do with the order in which you put things, in your sentences. If you're trying to write prose that's going to stick, always put the cause before the effect. Never put the effect and then they say what the cause was, because the cause comes before the effect. He was walking down the road and he stumbled over a rock, so he bumped his head. He bumped his head when he was walking down the road, stumbled over a rock. That makes the reader go backwards. You know, if you want forward motion, at least if your values are anything like mine, you want forward motion, and you want something very like transparency. I used to believe in very fancy, florid, beautiful sentences, and I was in love with John Updike's prose for a long, long time. I still am in a kind of way. And St. Clair McKelroy in New York occasionally would utter some final sentences. It was like a great galleon moving out, you know, on a moonbeam with sails fluttering. It was just that stuff killed me. And my early books sometimes show me trying to do that same sort of thing, or even worse, trying to echo Henry James's very subtle balances and oppositions and second thought. I don't think, well, for me at least, all these things were errors, and I learned how to write after 40 when I began really to value transparency, so there'd be no verbal fuzz to get between me and the reader, or really between the reader and what was being said on the page. The page, at that time, I felt the page should be like a pool, but with very clear water in it. So you just go down and down and down, and never feel any friction. Every now and then, one should produce the perfect verb, or you know what I mean, or some transcendent adjective. Not adverbs usually. Adverbs multiply like crazy and should be reduced, but really, really handsome, apt nouns. That isn't transparency, because when the reader comes along and finds that, if she is a good reader, her hair rises up the back of her head, and a little pleasure module begins to spin around. And she says, "Oh my God, how do you think of that word?" At least that's what used to happen to me when I read. Really good writing when I was much younger. Cause before effect. The other thing is a little trickier, and some people don't pay attention to it at all, and some people don't like it. But I think another thing you should pay attention to is the cadences of your sentences. So, because they make a kind of music. There's a sort of prose music that comes from long looping clauses or short clauses interrupted by longer clauses. There's a kind of rhythm going on. And to me, the most beautiful writing is writing in which the cadences link up from sentence to sentence. And they carry you on a kind of unheard musical raft all the way to the end of the paragraph. And if with luck, all the way to the end of the page. The writer Paul West, who suffered a terrible stroke a while back, said in an interview that he could hear the rhythms of sentences he was going to write like 30 pages ahead. Wow. Not me. but I do try to adjust them. So there's some kind of swing in the sentences, some kind of music that will affect the reader in a sort of tender-hearted way. Will ease the passage of the book. What do we got? I very often find myself reading books, and in the second sentence of the second paragraph begins, and when he looked through the window, and a little further down, but she never smiled. And I say to myself, no. It's better not to begin sentences with and or but. That looks like you're showing off. It's a deliberate. It's like a rim shot or something. It's like making a noise for the sake of a noise. And again, it's lazy. I do this myself over and over, but I generally strike it out. This is a little trickier, but I'm sure you'll follow. Every sentence, if it's a complex sentence, has a center, has the thing it's really about, and all those other little clauses are hooked up because they relate to it. I have found myself sometimes putting the center of the sentence in one of those little clauses. And then I look back and say, there's something really wrong here, Pay attention and make sure the center, what you're really talking about, is the main part of your sentence. This is a cruel rule. If you find a really good, cool, jazzy metaphor, and you look at it and it gleams, and you walk around the room and say, when I die, the New York Times is going to... Norman Mailer once said that in Barbary Shore, he was writing a sentence about a man who's being kissed by a woman he loved, and the sentence was, she kissed him like a sister, period. And then genius struck Mailer. He thought it, and he wrote older sister, period. And he awarded himself a Nobel Prize. That was fine. What do you find? If you have any worthwhile metaphor, you can only use it once. This is the rule of the job. You're not allowed to use it in the same book for sure. And you really shouldn't ever use it again. You just let it gleam away on the page where you put it and hope that enough people notice it. But they sure as hell will notice if you copy it in some other book. It's an iron law, I'm telling you. So that was rule number 8. Rule number 9 is a little subtler. Let's say that you're writing a scene in which some befuddled character is walking down the street with the intention of reaching a bridge a little while distance for the purpose of jumping off that bridge. You know enough to make the character take wrong turns now and again, to have him be confused, have other people know his confusion. Because one thing that always works is to have other people remark upon the thing you wish to be noticed in the scene. If you wish a character to be very beautiful, every now and then you have some character think, my God, that's a really beautiful woman. This is very simple, but it really works. The other thing which is helpful to me, not so much now, but certainly for years, is that if you wish to instill an atmosphere that is fearful and loaded with dread, you just have every now and then somebody think about how afraid he is. He looked in the closet, he felt a chill of fear. When George opened the front door, for a moment he was afraid of going down the steps. He couldn't say why, but he was afraid of going down the steps. See, it works. So, what you're doing in that case is you're prefiguring the action you're going to get to. It's when you have your little man moving in a foggy way toward a bridge from which you want to jump. Let's say you have the wind blows hat away, and he watches the hat skim off into the distance. Let's say when he moves his elbows, he looks a little bit like a bird, a very clumsy bird. And somebody standing in a shop window in a restaurant turns, looks out the window and he thinks, gee, that old guy looks like he's trying to take off like a bird. Or you could say the buildings seem to float in the fog. All of those things like that lead up in a subtle way to the guy jumping off the bridge. Now, it is best, though this is very contradictory advice, to write those kinds of things without being quite aware that you're doing it. If you load it in, the reader's going to know you're cheating. But if you do it lightly, and because your unconscious knows where you're going, it'll all mesh together nicely. So that was rule number 9. I'm going to skip rule 10 because we all know that it's bad form to repeat kind of unusual words in the same paragraph or even on the same page. When you submit a page like that to an editor, what they do is they circle the words and draw lines between them. You know, let's use the word between. He stood between Alice and Joe. When Joe was standing between Alice and the other guy, he felt that he should really be between Sam and Mac. There was a cat between the cupboards. There was a dog between cars, you know, so that you can see the lines going down the page. It's just, that too means you're asleep at a switch. So that's the one I'm not going to tell you about. Now, this is a plot matter. And it's the last of these little rules of 11. And it's a little hard to grasp, David. Hang on. Let's say you have a protagonist who is faced with a simple but meaningful choice, such as, am I going to marry Harry or am I going to marry Dan? We spent a good deal of the story or the novel building up the attractions and otherwise of Harry and Dan. And it is very difficult to choose between them. I could go on and on, I could make this whole thing all up, but I'll spare you. What you want to do, and things like that, what you invariably want to do, is have the person make a third choice. Do not choose Harry or Dan. Choose the guy who rides in on a horse the next day. The guy who steps out the elevator or office building. The reader will be, where did that come from? Avoid being banal if possible. Now, I want to talk a little bit about process. When I was a lad, process was a big deal. Everybody talked about process all the time. Painters especially talk about the process. So I thought, I want to get into the process. I want to see what the process is like. And so I wrote a couple of books, and then without too much psychic wear and tear, and a good deal of inner excitement, a good deal of pleasure. But then eventually, something happened which happened almost every time after that. So this experience is far more common than the sort of easy, effortless beginner's luck that I had before. At a certain point, I realized that I had no idea what was actually going on anymore at all. That all they seemed to do would be walking around a field or having lunch. They have lunch over and over and over. I knew I was going to have to go back and take out most of that stuff, but I didn't know. I thought I had an idea where everything was going to go, but it wasn't going there. This could happen in the middle of a book. This could happen after a year of working on a novel. All of a sudden, you're stuck in sand. The bloody thing won't move. You look at you look at what you had written, and it looks okay. It's workable. It can be made as something. You look ahead, and it's all a confusion. There's nothing there. So, at that point, you say, "Well, I'm ruined. This is it. Everything else is just luck." I have no idea what to do. I'm finished. I'm down the tubes. Now that is the process. That's the process of work.